Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 17 of Awakening the Ordinary. My name is Daniel Clower, and we need to talk. In this week's episode, instead of going a mile wide and an inch deep and talking about the dozens of events and news articles that have dropped this week, I actually want to talk about just a few key stories with you and really dive deeply into them and talk about the effects that we're going to be seeing in the near future from all of them. I'll be talking about the Iranian attack and how successful it actually was. We'll be talking about some of the immigration issues we're facing currently. I'll talk about how New York City is trying to elect a socialist and one of the surprising opponents he's facing. And we'll be talking about the economic situation we find ourselves in and kind of what to expect moving forward. But maybe the most important story I want to share with you this week is actually this first one. We're going to be talking about a specific Supreme Court ruling. The Supreme Court session is in its final week this past week, so they saved a lot of the juicy stuff for last. And there are a few cases actually that are worthy of discussion, but in this particular episode, we are going to be focusing on one that may be, and I'm not exaggerating here, one of the most important cases that the Supreme Court has heard in this century. I want to talk with you about Trump versus Casa Inc. Now, I'm sure some of you have heard about this case already, although you probably haven't heard it called Trump versus Casa Inc. You've probably heard it called the birthright citizenship case, because ostensibly that's what this is about. See, in his first day in office, President Trump signed an executive order ending birthright citizenship. Now, birthright citizenship is the concept that anybody born on American soil is inherently an American citizen. There are a couple of minor exceptions. For example, if you are an ambassador and you have a child while you're in the United States working as an ambassador for another country, your child is not automatically an American citizen. But by and large, every single person that is born here is considered a citizen, even if your parents are not legal citizens of this country. That is ratified in the Constitution and has been upheld for decades, centuries, essentially since the founding of this country. However, Mr. Trump decided on day one that he was going to write an executive order that completely nullified it. Now, obviously, he can't do that. That is not something that he is legally able to do. An executive order cannot in any way override the Constitution. A law can't override the Constitution. The only thing that can override the Constitution is a change to the Constitution itself, which would require a constitutional convention and 2/3 of the states to get together and write an amendment to the Constitution. That didn't happen, but that has also never stopped Mr. Trump from trying to get his objectives through regardless. Now, I have shared previously that I personally am frankly not even the hugest fan of birthright citizenship in and of itself. It's something that many other countries don't do. In fact, I don't know of any other developed Western country that has just complete birthright citizenship. However, I am a big fan of the Constitution, and I'm a big fan of the rule of law. And I don't believe that anyone, any president, any person, is above the Constitution to our country. Now, that being said, obviously, this birthright citizenship executive order was immediately challenged. It was found to be unconstitutional, of course, and a national injunction was put into place. A national injunction is when a judge rules that this particular order that you have given is illegal. And not only is it illegal here, but it's illegal everywhere in the entire country because it goes against, for example, the Constitution. And so I am going to put an injunction, meaning put a stop to it, not just here in my local state, but everywhere in the country, because everywhere in the country is afforded the rights of the Constitution. And that makes sense, generally speaking. If you, as a judge, as a legal practitioner, have read the Constitution and found that a particular order goes against not just your local state laws, but the laws of the entire country, it makes sense that you should be able to say, I'm putting a stop to this now. I'm not going to wait for the other states to have to go through each individual case on their own. We're just going to say you can't do this. Well, national injunctions have plagued administrations for decades now. Both Republicans and Democrats have been in office and faced national injunctions when they try and do something that is unconstitutional. And every time it happens, the sitting party, the sitting president complains about it. They say it's judicial overreach. They say it's these local judges trying to be more powerful than the president themselves. But frankly, it always comes across as a whiny hissy fit of not being able to do just whatever you want to do. Because if a national injunction is upheld, it's because it was actually found unconstitutional. That being said, the Trump administration fought this. And they didn't just fight this by saying, we think we should be able to end birthright citizenship, because that's not something that they could win. They frankly know that it is unconstitutional to try and end birthright citizenship with an executive order. It's not possible. Anybody who has even briefly read the Constitution, you don't have to be a legal scholar. It's right there in black and white. The Constitution is clear that people born here are citizens. And you can't just override the Constitution with an executive order. They know that. We know that. Judges know that. Everybody knows that. So instead of fighting it that way, what they decided to do was fight the idea of national injunctions. They said that judges are overreaching when they are stopping everything nationwide, and because of that, the Supreme Court should put an end to this practice. Well, the Supreme Court made their ruling, and unfortunately, that's exactly what they're doing. They are, by and large, putting an end to the practice of national injunctions. Now, I just want you to consider, regardless of where you sit on the birthright citizenship in particular argument, that this is going to have far-reaching consequences forever in our country. The thing about the United States that is so unique and so special is that we have taken this conglomeration of states, a united set of these 50 individual states that are almost like countries in and of themselves. But we're all bound together under this one federal constitution. It's truly beautiful. When you think about how large the United States is, when you think about how geographically large it is, how unique each culture is, how people that live in Washington State are going to be completely different from people that live in Florida, and yet somehow we are all bound under this same rule of law, this same federal government. It is genuinely special. It's part of what has made the United States of America a modern-day empire. But this ruling puts all of that into danger, sincere danger. I talked before about the risk of the balkanization of the United States, about how a ruling like this could possibly split the United States essentially into a series of individual countries almost. Because if you're not all bound by the same constitution, the same governing rule of foundational laws, it makes things really complicated and really tricky really fast. For example, I want to read a little bit from Justice Sotomayor's dissent. It's really awesome. I highly encourage you to read the dissenting opinion on this because they make a lot of really fantastic points. But I'm going to read you a few choice quotes just to kind of put this into perspective for you. She wrote, "Today the threat is to birthright citizenship. Tomorrow, a different administration may try to seize firearms from law-abiding citizens or prevent people of certain faiths from gathering to worship. The majority holds that, absent cumbersome class action litigation, courts cannot completely enjoin even such plainly unlawful policies unless doing so is necessary to afford the formal parties complete relief. Suppose an executive order barred women from receiving unemployment benefits or black citizens from voting. Is the government irreparably harmed and entitled to emergency relief by a district court order universally enjoining such policies? The majority apparently would say yes. And basically what she's saying there, just to kind of take it out of legalese a little bit, is she is saying that if the court is ruling that birthright citizenship is not important enough to allow a national injunction for, then really what would be? If the next president is a Democrat and says, you know what, I'm tired of children dying from guns. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and make it mandatory that everybody turn in all of their firearms. We're going to gather up firearms, we're going to take them from you, and we're not going to let you have them. Now, obviously, the Second Amendment says that the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, and so a lot of people would come out and say, you can't do that. You can't take my weapons. But the thing is, while individual judges in individual states may rule that way, some other judges may decide, well, no, you know what? I don't really like guns either. So yeah, go ahead. In my state, yes, you can go ahead and take all the guns. Or you could take it even further. You could take it as far as you can possibly imagine. The next president could say, you know what? I think that if you don't own land in this country, you don't have enough of a stake in our future to be worthy of having a vote. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the only people who can vote in our country are people who own land. And obviously that's unconstitutional. But unless a judge in every single state agrees, then there are going to be pockets in this country that don't allow voting for people who don't own land. That is the issue with this, because, again, the Constitution is very plain here. There is no real argument that birthright citizenship is not a right guaranteed by the Constitution. There's just not. It's in plain English. And I know ever since this case has passed, there have been people trying to come up with like various interpretations where if you add a comma here that's not actually in it, and if you change some of the words, then, you know, maybe they didn't actually mean birthright citizenship. But the truth is, yes, they do mean birthright citizenship, and nobody ever even argued that they didn't until just now. There are people that just plainly don't care. They are partisan, and they don't care whether or not it's constitutional. They just care whether or not their guy, their president, their team is for or against it. So if we have any state right now that wants to end birthright citizenship, all they have to do is nothing. They can sit there. They can simply not put a case forward that they want to put an injunction on this birthright citizenship order for their state. Or they just have to turn down any cases if any individual citizens or non-citizens try and put forward a case. See, it gets complicated because what the Supreme Court is saying is that, first of all, you have to be personally damaged by the ruling in order to bring a case forward. So that means that, generally speaking, the only people who are actually going to be able to bring a case forward are going to be people who are affected directly by this ruling. And most of the time, 99% of the time, that's going to be non-citizens, so people that are here illegally. And first of all, obviously, people that are here illegally may not want to, for pretty obvious reasons, put their name out there as somebody fighting against this. I mean, that obviously increases their risk of being deported. It increases their risk of violence. It increases all kinds of negative risks in their life by putting their name out there and speaking up for themselves. And then, second of all, they have to find somebody who's going to be willing to go to bat for them. Lawyers ain't cheap. They're just not. And usually lawyers that work on these class action lawsuits, they do so because they're looking for a pretty easy win and a big payday. But there's not going to be any payday the only payout that's going to happen is that these people will maintain their citizenship. It's not like they're going to be given any kind of a big payout or anything like that. So these lawyers are going to essentially have to probably work pro bono to fight for these people who shouldn't have to fight at all to maintain their citizenship. So you've got an issue with people being able to bring forward cases. You've got an issue with judges who are just likely going to be partisan and either not hear cases that they don't want to hear or make a ruling that is plainly unconstitutional just because that's what their guy wants. And then you've got the issue of not even being able to get representation for the people who do bring cases forward, because lawyers across the country are not always going to want to work pro bono on a case like this. They're just not. Another banger quote here by Justice Sotomayor. With a stroke of a pen, the president has made a solemn mockery of our Constitution. And rather than stand firm, the court gives way. Because such complicity should know no place in our system of law, I dissent. She's basically saying that the president has said that he is more powerful than the Constitution. And the courts have ruled that they're not going to stop him. They're not making a ruling on whether or not he's actually allowed to do this, because that's not what they brought the case forward for. They're making the ruling on whether or not they are going to stop him from doing this thing that is so plainly unconstitutional. And actually, I guess speaking of that, Justice Jackson wrote an additional dissent. And typically speaking, if a case is split and the majority writes their opinion, there will be one dissenting opinion that all the other justices kind of just sign their name on and say, ditto. Yeah, me too. But in this case, Justice Jackson decided that she wanted to write her own dissent as well. She said that she wanted to emphasize that this court's ruling posed an existential threat to the rule of law. Justice Jackson wrote that Trump's request to be rid of universal injunctions is, quote, at bottom, a request for this court's permission to engage in unlawful behavior and to continue doing something that a court has determined violates the Constitution. She's saying that what the Trump administration is doing is saying, yeah, we know this is against the law. We know this is against the Constitution, but we don't like that they are stopping us from doing it everywhere all at once. We don't think that's fair. And so we want you to let us keep breaking the law in other places that haven't yet stopped us. Please and thank you. And the Supreme Court said, yes, sir. Justice Jackson continued on saying that in granting that wish, the majority has permitted Trump to act not unlike a monarch, giving the executive the go-ahead to sometimes wield the kind of unchecked arbitrary powers the founders crafted our Constitution to eradicate. By placing the onus on victims to invoke the law's protection, the court has created circumstances in which a Martian arriving here from another planet would surely wonder, what good is the Constitution? And the truth is, I don't think there's any real answer to that. Because if you are admitting that this is an unconstitutional executive order, then what purpose is there to stop national injunctions on this particular order? In the Biden administration, President Biden wanted to cancel a bunch of student debt. He wanted to just basically wipe it away and have the federal government pay for it. And that was found unconstitutional. And that was stopped by national injunction. So on something like paying off the debt of students, they said, yeah, you can go ahead and stop that with a national injunction. That's totally fine. But on something like ending birthright citizenship and effectively, by the way, making untold millions of people completely stateless, which is a violation of international law, they're saying, yeah, you know what? I think these judges are overreaching. Again, it's just, it makes zero sense You are allowing a group of people who were born in this country, by the way, through no choice of their own. It's not like they did anything to deserve this. They were born here. They couldn't control that. And now you are taking away their citizenship in this country. They don't have citizenship in any other country. They have never necessarily even lived or gone to any other country. And you're saying we are going to take your citizenship away. And the Supreme Court is saying, okay, fine. In the states that don't want to put a stop to this, fine. Because it's apparently overreach for a judge to say this is unconstitutional, and so I will not let this happen to any citizen of the United States of America anywhere. Now, Justice Jackson ended her dissent with this awesome line. She said, "Perhaps the degradation of our rule of law regime would happen anyway. But this court's complicity in the creation of a culture of disdain for lower courts, their rulings, and the law as they interpret it will surely hasten the downfall of our governing institutions, enabling our collective demise." And I think that's a great point. I think as time goes on, empires fall. It's inevitable. And very frequently, the reason they fall is because an authoritarian regime takes power, abuses its power, abuses its citizens. And maybe that is inevitable. Maybe that was going to happen one day anyway. But if history gets the chance to look back on one defining moment of the fall of the American empire, I guarantee you, Casa Inc. versus Trump is going to be a big part of that. Because what this is saying is essentially the president is above the Constitution. The president can go ahead and enact whatever he wants. And any state that doesn't feel like challenging him is going to live under that regime, is going to have to live with that rule. And it doesn't matter if it's unconstitutional, and it doesn't matter if it's completely against the law. Because the only way an injunction can be filed is for your specific district, your specific state. There is actually a loophole here. Justice Barrett was part of the majority opinion, meaning the group that said that this is fine. We're going to go ahead and stop national injunctions. And she ended up writing the majority opinion, and she kind of tried to play the middle ground a little bit and said that she wasn't saying that national injunctions were never, ever allowed, just that this wasn't a serious enough issue for it to be used. Here's what she wrote. She indicated that the nationwide injunctions are limited only to the extent that the injunctions are broader than necessary. Lower courts shall move expeditiously to figure out how broad the injunctions can be. So, essentially what she's saying is there are going to be cases where a national injunction is appropriate. Because an injunction just absolutely needs to be broad enough to cover enough of the country, because enough people are affected, that an injunction has to happen immediately, everywhere, all at once. And so sometimes national injunctions are going to be allowed. But to me, what that means is Justice Amy Coney Barrett was leaving a loophole, essentially for Republicans. Because right now, the Supreme Court is a majority conservative court. And clearly, with this ruling, they are showing that their partisanship is going to get in the way of their lawful duty to uphold the Constitution. So, for example, a judge in a lower court, and that's probably going to be one of their favorite judges in Texas or Louisiana, can issue a nationwide injunction against a Democratic administration, who will then appeal the decision and say, hey, you guys just stopped nationwide injunctions for your guy, Mr. Trump. You need to go ahead and stop this one. And then the conservative justices on the court are going to say, no, this one is actually totally necessary. This one is fine. Nationwide injunction for this particular issue, totally reasonable. But the thing is, there is essentially no greater issue than the citizenship of millions of Americans. I don't understand how you can possibly argue that birthright citizenship, which affects literally every single state in the union, is not a big enough issue to warrant a national injunction, but anything, literally anything else is. There is not a great enough issue that would warrant a national injunction if birthright citizenship doesn't. But I'm telling you, she wrote that for a reason. These justices are careful with their words, especially when they're writing their opinions, for the majority especially. When they're writing these majority opinions, they always like to lay groundwork and foundation for future rulings. And so I can almost guarantee you, if one of the examples happened that Justice Sotomayor wrote about, where, for example, a Democrat decided that they just wanted to take everybody's guns, well, then the Supreme Court may very well say a national injunction is completely necessary. But I think that just reeks of partisanship. It's truly disturbing. It's truly disgusting. What is happening to our country? The Supreme Court has a lifetime appointment, and the stated reason for that is so that they can be above party politics, so that they don't have to be afraid of going against their current administration, their current party, whoever it was that appointed them. They don't have to be afraid to go against them. And yet, here we have a Supreme Court that is so plainly and blatantly disregarding the Constitution, the most sacred document in our country, the thing that our soldiers are sworn to uphold and protect. Our Supreme Court has turned its back on. And the fact is, there is almost no reasonable way to fight against something like this, and yet we must fight against things like this. So I know for a long time, Democrats kind of lost their mind talking about how the next Democrat president needs to just expand the Supreme Court, which they're allowed to do, and pack it full of, extremely liberal justices so that they can start getting their way when it comes to rulings like this. I know especially when Roe versus Wade got overturned, a lot of Democrats were really losing it about it and saying that the next Democratic president needs to just load the Supreme Court with liberal justices. And I was always against that. I was. Because I don't believe that the Supreme Court should be a partisan tool, because it should be above politics. But when you look at something like this, what other answer is there? This is such an unreasonable attack on the Constitution. This is such an unreasonable attack on the citizens of the United States. There is no reasonable course of action to take from here. The only course of action is unreasonable escalation. That's it. And so I guess I will end this segment by asking you guys, what do you think the next step is? I will not hear any arguments that ending birthright citizenship is actually constitutional. I will not. It is plainly untrue on its face. It is farcical to try and argue it. It is ridiculous. And frankly, you make yourself look stupid. So if we can agree that this is not constitutional, what next? What do we do about it? You can't vote out a Supreme Court justice. So what do we do? You can vote out the administration writing these unlawful, unconstitutional executive orders, and that's going to happen no matter what. Trump can't be elected again, thank God. But for the next 3.5 years, we are going to be living under a regime that is allowed to write whatever orders they want, unlawfully, not through Congress, not through writing a bill and getting it passed, through an executive order with the swipe of a pen. The president can do something as absolutely insane as ending birthright citizenship, and it'll be upheld. And I just want to reiterate here for all of you people talking about, oh, this would never happen. They would never say that, for example, only white people can vote or only Christians are allowed to have gatherings of worship or whatever. Okay, I hear you. But I promise you, 5 years ago, nobody had even considered trying to end birthright citizenship. That was not on anybody's radar. That was in Stephen Miller's fevered wet dreams. Nobody would consider it because it is ludicrous and unconstitutional on its face. So don't tell me you don't think these things are going to happen. I didn't think these things were going to happen, and they have happened. So what's next? All right, so the next topic I want to talk about with you guys is this Iranian attack, and this is going to be a pretty short segment. Basically, I just want to review essentially what the results were of the attack and what you might expect going forward. And I touched on this briefly before, so again, I'm not going to dive too crazy deep into this, but I just wanted to, I guess, kind of spitball with you here a little bit. I want to get your opinion on it too, because I'm very curious about what you think is next, what your predictions are, and whether or not you think it was all worth it. We had this attack on Iran. It's apparently not a war, even though there was a war between Israel and Iran, and we got involved in it. That's apparently not getting us into a war. Okay. So moving forward, we bombed a few nuclear sites in Iran, and leaked documents showed that we maybe were not as successful as we thought. The preliminary results showed that we maybe didn't penetrate as deeply into Fordow, for example, as we needed to. It turns out Fordow is like 90 meters deep, and our bombs could only penetrate like 60 meters deep or something like that. So while we did some damage, it looks like we definitely did not completely obliterate their nuclear program like somebody was claiming. And it looks like we maybe only set them back by a few months as far as their nuclear program, not years. And we definitely didn't stop it like entirely. I know one DoD official anonymously reported that their biggest OPSEC concern, their biggest operational security concern, was the president himself tweeting things and basically kind of hinting for weeks that we were going to be bombing these places. Because one of the problems is we know for a fact, because we saw it, that trucks rolled up to the Fordow facility and other facilities a couple of days before we bombed. These trucks then left, and we don't know where they went. We also know that we couldn't really find the enriched uranium after we bombed the place. So presumably these trucks rolled up, took the enriched uranium, and went somewhere else that we don't know about. Did some of the equipment get destroyed? Almost definitely. We dropped a bunch of huge, humongous bombs on them. Did all of it get destroyed? It seems like no. So if not all of these centrifuges that they need to enrich uranium got destroyed, if not all of the rocketry tech that they need to weaponize the enriched uranium got destroyed, then that means they can still make nuclear weapons. And I guess it kind of reminds me of a story I read once where they said that if you ever get into a fight, what you need to do is hit hard and hit fast and make sure that they can't hit you back ever again. And it looks like we hit slow and kind of weak. And it looks like if I were Iran, I would be doing absolutely everything I could to rush a nuclear weapon as fast as possible. Because now they know that we are willing to bomb them to prevent it. We were in talks, we were in negotiations, it seemed to be going okay, and then all of a sudden we kind of sucker punched them. We did a slow, kind of weak and limp-wristed sucker punch, but it was still a sucker punch. And so now I wonder if they're ever going to be willing or able to come negotiate with us. Because when they tried to negotiate, we kind of just tricked them, right? I mean, we said that they had 60 days, but then we set up a meeting with them after that 60 days that ended up having to get canceled because we bombed them. We said, oh, we're going to give you 2 weeks, but then we actually only gave them 3 days. I mean, it's kind of shady. It's kind of shifty. It's kind of tricky. Tricky Trump. And it's kind of, it's not conducive for building a good negotiating relationship, basically. If you know that the person you're trying to negotiate with is definitely willing to lie to you and sucker punch you, you're always going to be watching your back, and you're not really going to want to make any deals with them because they're not going to uphold their deals. They just lied to you a bunch. First of all, they escaped with a bunch of their nuclear stuff. They are in all likelihood going to want to rush a nuclear weapon as fast as they can now, because that's going to be the only thing that actually gives them leverage at the table. And they're not really going to want to talk with us about it. They're not going to want to talk with anybody about it, because the international community didn't really raise a bunch of hell about this. They kind of just shrugged it off and didn't say anything. And it makes sense. I mean, Iran does not have too many friends right now. I know the former Russian president was talking about how they were willing to give Iran nukes right this second if they wanted, but I'm pretty sure he was just drunk and in a basement somewhere. He doesn't have any actual authority or power to do that. I mean, Iran saw what happened to Ukraine after Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons. They got invaded. They're still under invasion. Ukraine saw what happened to Muammar Gaddafi when he gave up his nuclear weapons. He got killed in a brutal and horrifying way that got televised across the world because he gave up his nuclear weapons. And they see how these weaker and frankly unhinged states like North Korea are able to kind of just do whatever they want, basically, because they have nuclear weapons. Same with Russia. Russia has shown itself to be, honestly, frankly, relatively ineffective when it comes to their military might. I mean, the Ukraine invasion was supposed to be 3 days, and we're on like year 3 now. But they have nuclear weapons, and so nobody's going to really do anything to them. So why wouldn't Iran just rush a nuclear weapon as fast as possible? There's just no downside. They didn't have a nuclear weapon before. Our own intelligence said they were not making a nuclear weapon, and then we bombed them anyway. So please, somebody explain to me how this was worth it. Because once Iran does have a nuclear weapon and does therefore have some leverage, they're going to use it. They're going to use that leverage to do terrible, terrible things. And something tells me they are not going to be willing to overlook the fact that we just bombed them a little bit. We just gave them a little teeny tiny bomb as a snack. They're not okay with that. They were chanting death to America the day after. And one weird thing I keep seeing, by the way, is a bunch of MAGA people are coming out and saying that the Iranian people are super happy that we bombed them, which I don't understand that at all. It's just factually not true. You can look up video footage of them storming the streets and yelling death to America and death to Israel the day after we bombed them. I just really, really sincerely question anybody's, I don't know, logic or lack thereof, who thinks that a country would be absolutely lit that we were bombing them. Yeah, let's go. Right now, the Trump administration is not denying the leaks, first of all. They're super mad that the leaks came out, that the preliminary results were that we didn't damage their nuclear program as much as we thought. They're really, really mad that that got leaked. They're saying Democrats leaked it. They're saying they want a full investigation into who leaked it, but they're not saying it's not true. And second of all, they're kind of trying to paint anybody who is against this bombing in Iran as being anti-troop, which makes zero sense to me. Why is saying I don't want to put our military at risk, I don't want to risk our military lives for some engagement that we should never have been involved with, anti-military? Why is you saying that you want to put our men and women's lives at risks pro-military? Somebody explain that to me, please. Use small words, because apparently I'm dumb. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on that briefly. It's just something that I guess kind of bothered me a little bit. I saw a lot of misinformation going around about that, and none of it really made any logical sense to me. So what do you think? I mean, are you still happy that we did this? Because I know a lot of you are going to say these reports are fake or whatever. If these reports are true, if these preliminary reports that we did not obliterate their nuclear program are true, let's just pretend like those are true for a second. If they're true, are you still happy that we did it? Because I know a lot of people were coming at me saying that they were happy that we would do anything that would prevent Iran from having nuclear weapons. But if it didn't really prevent them from having nuclear weapons, are you still happy about it? If in 3 months we have to do this all over again, are you okay with that? I mean, how far is too far? At this point, it's almost like a sunk cost fallacy, right? Like, well, we bombed them once, so we're already in. So I guess from now on, we just kind of have to keep doing it over and over again until a regime change just happens. So tell me where you're at on that. I'm genuinely curious. I want to hear from you. If we did not actually obliterate their nuclear program, are you still happy we did it? If you're not happy about it, are you going to do anything about it? The next topic that I want to cover for you here is about immigration. And there's going to be a few kind of subtopics when we talk about this. First of all, I just want to talk about kind of what do people actually want when it comes to immigration? Because I know Republicans say that immigration is one of their strongest policies. It's one of the things they get the most approval on when it comes to polling. And they're right. And Democrats are one of the least popular when it comes to their immigration policy. And some of that is just down to messaging and, frankly, fake news. I mean, you have so many people coming out and saying that Joe Biden had a completely open border and Democrats want open borders. And no, I mean, that's just not true. No Democrat really has called for completely open borders. What does that even mean? Like, if you are claiming that we have or had open borders at some point, please explain to me what that means, because we still have Border Patrol. We still had Border Patrol. We still had barriers in place and checkpoints in place at the border. We did not have a big welcome sign saying, everybody come on in. We just had a lot more people enter illegally. But it's not like we were just inviting it or saying we didn't care anymore. It was happening. It was illegal still. We just weren't as successful at defending our southern border as we necessarily should have been. It's just the first thing. It's just a minor aside, but we never had open borders, okay? There is no Democrat calling for open borders. I mean, when it comes to immigration, what people want, and this is shown overwhelmingly in polling, and this is Democrats and Republicans, very left-leaning people want this too. We want people who have criminal records, who have felonies, who committed violent crimes, gone. We want that for sure. Everybody universally wants that. And then if people committed non-violent but still felonious crimes, usually people still want them gone too. But what people, generally speaking, and this shows in the polling as well, and it shows in the communities that are affected, is they don't want people whose only crime was crossing the border to be kicked out, at least not right away and not as a priority. They don't want somebody who has been living in their town as a member of the community, who owns a shop or does work or has children in the area or whatever. They don't want those people snatched out of their community and sent away for essentially no reason. No reason other than one time, decades ago, they committed a misdemeanor of crossing the border illegally. That's not what people want. And again, that shows in polling, that shows in examples. There are plenty of examples in this administration in particular, because this administration has not been targeting felonious criminals or people who've committed violent crimes. They're basically just snatching up anybody they can possibly get their hands on, whether or not the people have actively been following the law, going to their check-ins and, doing things quote unquote the right way, other than the one time when they crossed the border illegally. This administration has been targeting those people at a much higher rate than previous administrations. So that's why you get these examples of people in a Texas town where a illegal immigrant from China had kids that were about to graduate high school that had been there their whole lives and were American citizens, got snatched up, and suddenly the whole town came together to protest and try and get her freed. Or in Connecticut, a young boy, he was 18 years old, he just graduated high school, and he was snatched at the graduation ceremony and taken away. People don't want that. By and large, they don't want that. So just to kind of lay out the facts for you, the actual statistics, Since late last year to the end of May, and yes, so that does include some of the Biden administration, we arrested roughly 180,000 illegal immigrants. And only 60,000 of them, so really like 1/3 of the people we arrested, were convicted of crimes. And the overwhelming majority of those crimes that they were convicted of were like traffic violations or other like immigration crimes. So not violent assaults, not theft, not anything like that. Currently, half of the people in ICE custody haven't even been charged with a crime, with any crime, much less convicted of one. So when Democrats say that they're afraid to speak out against the immigration policies of this administration because that's like their weak policy point when it comes to polling. And when Republicans are saying, well, this is what we voted for, Trump's doing exactly what we voted for, none of that is true. Because no, that's not what you voted for. And no, that's not what people are polling well on. Half of the people detained by ICE right now have not even been charged with anything. And most of the people, the vast majority of the people that did have convictions on record were convictions for like traffic violations. So like speeding or driving with a suspended license or without a license at all, or like the things that your regular everyday average Joe can do. And so to that end, I want to investigate this one specific case that I was reading about this week. It's actually an Army veteran, Sae Joon Park. He was an Army veteran and he had actually received a Purple Heart. He legally immigrated here when he was 7 years old. His parents brought him here. And immediately after high school in 1988, he joined the Army. He said he didn't really know what he wanted to do with his life yet. He wanted to kind of think about it. He knew he could get a GI Bill and it would help him on his route to citizenship, full citizenship, as opposed to just a green card. And so he joined the Army in 1988. In 1989, when we invaded Panama, he was there on the ground and he got shot in the back. His dog tags happened to be in exactly the right place to kind of redirect the bullet, and it deflected it away from his spine. And so that's what he credits personally with him not being completely paralyzed right now. So regardless, 1989, he gets shot in the back. He gets taken to a hospital for a few weeks. He's visited by a 3 or 4 star general who gives him a Purple Heart. I think President Bush visited that same hospital. I didn't read if they actually met or not, but then he is released from the hospital and he is honorably discharged. He says that back then they did not really know what PTSD was at all, but that's what he had. He was not able to sleep through the night. He was having horrible nightmares and flashbacks and terrors because he was injured in combat. So he said that initially he started smoking weed to basically help him sleep at night. And then in 1992, he moved to Hawaii. And he moved on to harder drugs when he lived in Hawaii. Hawaii has a really horrific drug problem. It's very bad. I have heard stories from people who lived there about the tent cities filled with drug addicts and how really heartbreaking and heart-wrenching it is. In 1992, he moved to Hawaii. His drug problem got worse. He moved on to harder stuff. In the late 2000s, he was meeting with his drug dealer to get some crack cocaine. The cops showed up. His drug dealer bailed, threw the bag of drugs in his car, ran off, got away, and Park got arrested. Because of his history as a veteran, the judge was relatively lenient on him. He assigned him to rehab. He went to rehab, and like 20 days out of rehab, he relapsed. He got nabbed again. He was sent to rehab again. He relapsed again almost immediately. And the judge mentioned, if you come into this court again and you test positive for drugs, I'm throwing the book at you and you're going to prison. So he got freaked out. He ran. He didn't show up for his next visit. He ran back to Hawaii, actually. And that's when he found out that he had a warrant out for his arrest and that marshals were going to try and find him and get him. And so he said that he did not realize that skipping his bail like that was a felony and was going to make him ineligible for full-on citizenship. But as soon as he realized what was going on, he went and turned himself in because he didn't want to be arrested in front of his children. He didn't want to freak them out. So he served 2 years in prison, was released. He was then detained by immigration, and they were going to deport him. He fought back and forth for a while and eventually won basically a stay of deportation. They said that as long as he showed up for a yearly check-in and was drug-free and was gainfully employed, then he could stay. And this was back in roughly 2011. Fast forward 14 years. And in 2025, for some reason, even though he had been showing up, he had been clean off of drugs, he had been gainfully employed, he was told that he was getting deported. And then they said, actually, you know what? We were going to deport you at this check-in that he showed up for, but we'll give you 3 weeks so you can get everything in order and you need to get out. So they gave him 3 weeks to self-deport, or they were going to send him out of the country. Now, keep in mind, he has 2 children. They are adults now, and he is taking care of his mother, who has dementia. He is her primary caretaker, but that doesn't matter because back in 2009, he had a drug charge that he went to jail for 2 years for. And so now he's concerned because they said he has to leave the country for 10 years. He doesn't know if he's going to be there when his mother passes. He doesn't know if he's going to be able to go to his daughter's wedding. They're sending him to a country that he hasn't lived in since he was 7 years old. This is a relatively old man now, and he's being sent out of the country for 10 years for a crime he committed a decade and a half ago. What is the point of that? What is the point? Does it make anybody's lives better sending away somebody who has proven that he is now an upstanding member of society with a job, who is drug-free, who is taking care of the elderly, who has raised children in this country, and they're sending him away for 10 years? For what? Why? To what end? And the reason is because the cruelty is the point. Because they don't want to just stop with illegal immigration. Stephen Miller just tweeted this, and it's because of something that I'm actually going to talk about in just a little bit here. But he tweeted out, "Unchecked immigration has turned New York City into what it is today." He did not say unchecked illegal immigration. He said immigration. He said the fact that foreign people dare to come live in our country is what is wrong with New York City nowadays. And by the way, that is disregarding the fact that New York City has about a 36% foreign-born population, and that's what they've been having for like 4 decades. This is not new. This is how it's been since Stephen Miller's parents arrived in America. Charlie Kirk, who is a talking head for, I think, Turning Point USA, he said, "The lesson from New York City is that both illegal and legal immigration can ruin your country." They are saying the quiet part out loud. They have been so emboldened by this presidency that they are willing to outright be completely xenophobic and frankly racist by saying that the problem with our country is that people not born in our country come and live here. I don't even know if they could pass the citizenship test, frankly, because they don't seem to have any concept of law and order or civics or how our government is supposed to be run. So I think it's pretty rich that people like Stephen Miller are talking about how immigration is a problem. I would take genuinely any legal immigrant over Stephen Miller any day. Any day. I'll do it right now. Please. Somebody take Stephen Miller, take him out of here, Go away, go to some other country, replace them with any legal immigrant ever from any country, and I will be thrilled. And to that end, they are increasing efforts to denaturalize citizens of the United States. So what they're saying right now is that they're going to be going after people who became citizens, legally became citizens of the United States and committed certain crimes. They are going to try and take away their citizenship and get them deported. Now, they are saying that the crimes that they're going to be after are really heinous crimes, really terrible, violent crimes, violent assaults, that kind of thing. But the fact is, they are more than willing to accuse people of really heinous, horrible crimes without any evidence whatsoever. For example, we all saw it with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He was brought back to this country, and they accused him of really horrific crimes. They said he was trafficking drugs, trafficking children. I mean, really horrific stuff. But the actual charges that they are indicting him with are basically just giving a ride from some men in Texas who were here illegally to Maryland to work construction with him. But they're accusing him of crazy things. They're saying that he gave rides like that to thousands of criminals. They literally said that 3 to 5 times a week, he would drive 9 to 10 illegal immigrants from Texas to Maryland, which a judge pointed out is literally physically impossible. You can't drive from Texas to Maryland like 5 times a week. They said he brought his children with him too. Like that's literally not possible. But they accused him of it because they are willing to accuse people of horrific things if it matches their narrative. So they're saying they want to denaturalize and deport citizens that do horrible things, but then they have shown us that they will accuse anybody of doing horrible things. So I'm extraordinarily concerned because these cases that they're going to be bringing forward to denaturalize citizens are not criminal cases. You don't bring them to a court of law. They are not afforded an attorney if they can't pay for one. They're not put in front of a jury of their peers, and you don't have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they did the stuff that you're accusing them of. These are civil cases. And when it's a civil case, first of all, you don't get an attorney for free. You can pay for one, but attorneys are expensive. And second of all, the burden of proof is not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's just more probable than not. So essentially, the difference is basically in a criminal case, you have to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt, which means that essentially there is no way that this did not happen. There's like a 99.9 chance that this happened, and we can show you with a bunch of proof. But in a civil case, when you just have to prove more probable than not, it just means it's like 51% likely versus 49%. It's just saying, yeah, we may not have a ton of evidence for it, but it seems legit. So yeah, we think it's probably true. So the government can bring these civil charges against people, and they can do it against literally anybody. And unfortunately, if they can't afford an attorney, I mean, like, what are the odds that these people are going to be able to defend themselves against the federal government? Most people don't speak legalese. Most people don't know the kind of things that you can file in court, or, you know, the paperwork that you have to do, the motions you can file, the objections you can levy. I mean, most people don't know any of that stuff. So the federal government is going to target people that they don't like and accuse them of horrible things, and then not have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, just have to prove it more probable than not, when these people may not have lawyers of any kind. It's really disturbing. It is genuinely disturbing, and it paints a bleak picture because, again, that's not what people actually want. People want illegal immigrants who have actually committed terrible crimes to be deported. That is all they really want. You have some fringe people who say, get rid of them all, get them all out of here. You have the Stephen Millers of the world who are just racist, horrible, terrible people who don't understand that this nation was genuinely built on the back of immigrants. But for the most part, most people don't want to get rid of their community. Most people don't want to just completely otherize people just because they weren't born here. And it is so easy to fall for the media trap. You turn on Fox News and they would have you believe that they're just snatching up the worthless, horrible dregs of society and sending them to some terrible prison to rot away forever because that's what they deserve. But that's just not true. The facts do not back that up. And when it's not happening in your community to somebody you know, it's so easy to just disregard it. Not my problem, not in my backyard, so who cares? It's nobody I know. They probably deserved it. Maybe they did do something horrible, and, let's just let the facts bear out, and we'll see what happens. And then by the time you let it all play out, it's too late. The Supreme Court has now ruled that they can send illegal immigrants to countries that they've never even been to. If somebody comes here from, Venezuela, we can send them to Sudan. How does that make any sense? It is cruel and unusual and horrific. So again, I'm not typically some lefty. I'm not usually somebody who is fighting on the side of illegal immigrants. I'm not. I am genuinely a centrist. I am usually in the middle of the pack somewhere. But this administration has gone so far off the deep end. It is crazy. And not only is it crazy, it is just immoral and horrific. You can't just sit by and watch this happen to your fellow citizens, to your fellow countrymen, regardless of their citizenship. You can't just sit there and let it happen. So I implore you, please, let your voice be heard. There are protests every month, multiple protests. They're usually set up on weekends. You can get out there. You can let your voice be heard. You can call your senators and congressmen and tell them, don't destroy my community. Don't take away my neighbors and send them to some country they've never been to. For the love of God and country, have some decency. Have some empathy, please. And I guess speaking of the whole denaturalizing people and war on immigrants and stuff, this is actually the perfect time to talk about what's going on in New York City. Because in New York City, they just had their Democratic primary for the mayoral race. And it was a pretty big deal. So let's rewind a second. Let's talk about why a primary race for a mayor of some city is even important at all. So New York City is, first of all, considered one of the most powerful, important, special cities in the entire world. And I tend to agree. It's kind of the seat of power other than Washington, D.C. in the United States. It's a cultural superpower. And in some ways, what happens in New York City affects the entire country. It helps shift the Overton window that I've talked about before. It helps change the topics that are being talked about and the perspectives that so many Americans have. So why do the primaries in New York City matter? Well, New York City is a Democratic stronghold. So, for example, in the state of New York, even though Trump gained a huge amount of votes compared to last election, I think he was up 14 points or something like that. In New York City, 80% of people still voted for Kamala Harris because in New York City, they vote for Democrats. That's just how they do things. And maybe it's because Republicans hate immigrants openly and actively, and a third of the city is foreign born, but who knows? Not my place to guess. But regardless, in New York City, they vote for the Democrat. So historically speaking, whoever wins the Democratic primaries when it comes to things like the mayor, pretty much win the race. They're not going to vote for a Republican. So that's that. That's why it is such a big deal that Zoran Mamdani, a self-proclaimed Democratic Socialist, just won the New York primaries. He ran on extremist ideals like freezing rent and free public transportation and making sure that there weren't food deserts in the city anywhere, meaning places where there wasn't an easily accessible grocery store within, 5 or so blocks. And part of what he's running on is a lot of different pilot programs too. So he says things just aren't working right now. So he wants to try things out and see what could work better. So, for example, one of the things that has gotten a lot of press is he wants to try a pilot program where he puts one government-run grocery store in each of the 5 boroughs. So 5 grocery stores total in all of New York City. Not a huge program, but it's a pilot program to see how it works. Is it successful? Does it help bring down the cost of living for people? Does it help increase employment? Does it help get rid of some of these food deserts? If it works, awesome. That's great. We just discovered a new way of moving forward that will help fix things. And if it doesn't work, it's just a pilot program. It's not that big of a deal. You experiment, we try things, sometimes they work. In his own words, he said, I have many critiques of capitalism. And I think ultimately the definition for me of why I call myself a democratic socialist is the words of Dr. Martin Luther King decades ago. Call it democracy, call it democratic socialism. There must be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country. And that's why what I'm focused on is dignity and taking on income inequality. For too long, politicians have pretended we are spectators to the crisis of affordability. We are actually actors. And we have a choice to either exacerbate, like Mayor Adams has done, or to respond to it and solve it. And I think that's great. But obviously, the establishment hates that. So, cue the establishment Democrats doing the absolute worst thing they could possibly do, which should not be surprising to any of you who have been paying any attention to what's going on right now. The Democratic establishment will consistently find ways to surprise and disappoint you and choose the stupidest and most morally bankrupt outcome every single time. So, for example, in this case, the Democratic royalty, the elites like Bill Clinton and James Clyburn, aka the Kingmaker, and like Mike Bloomberg came together and they gave their endorsement to a candidate in this primary race. Did they endorse the young, dynamic Democratic socialist who's getting people excited to try new things and combat income inequality? No, of course not. No. You know who they endorsed? I'm not kidding. Andrew Cuomo. Yes, that Andrew Cuomo. The guy who left politics in disgrace in 2021, 4 short years ago, because he was credibly accused of sexually harassing like 12 of his staffers. And actually, you guys got to check this out. This happened during one of the debates where Mamdani and Cuomo were kind of going at it. And look, just take a look. You'll see what I mean.
To Mr. Cuomo, I have never had to resign in disgrace. I have never cut Medicaid. I have never stolen hundreds of millions of dollars from the MTA. I have never hounded the 13 women who credibly accused me of sexual harassment. I have never sued for their gynecological records, and I have never done those things because I am not you, Mr. Cuomo. And furthermore, the name is Mamdani, M-A-M-D-A-N-I. You should learn how to say it because we got to get it right.
So, yeah. Yeah. So Democrats decided to endorse that guy who is so embroiled in controversy and has done so many horrible, heinous things, but he's not going to combat income inequality. He's not going to shake up the establishment. He's not going to do anything that might rip power away from the old heads that are leading the DNC right now. Mamdani won anyway. It doesn't matter that Bill Clinton and James Clyburn and Mike Bloomberg and all these bigwig Democrats came out in favor of Andrew Cuomo because Mamdani won. He won. He got people fired up and he won big. I mean, the polling was looking kind of bad for him for a while, but he won anyway. And Democrats, if they were not stupid, would be excited about that. They would be chomping at the bit to support this guy because he is exactly what the party needs. They need a young, new, fresh face. They need somebody with fresh ideas. And as far right as the Trump administration is running, that's how far left the Democratic Party should be running. And so now he is officially the Democratic nominee for mayor. And so now Democrats have absolutely got to just get in line behind him. They have to. Remember back in 2016 when the Bernie bros were so mad about Hillary Clinton for stealing the nomination, which she kind of did, by the way, and how Democrats said, okay, Bernie bros, you had your moment in the sun, but now it's time to get in line because Hillary Clinton has won the nomination. So just get in line and follow behind because it's her turn, baby. Well, guess what? The tables have turned now. And for all of you people who were calling for Bernie bros to get in line and support a candidate they didn't really like because she had a D beside her name, well, it's your turn. It's time for you to get in line and go support this guy because he is the one who won. He is the official Democratic nominee. So get in line. And if you can't support him, you shut up about it. And of course, Democrats are not the only ones who are upset about this. Republicans are like pooping their pants about this guy right now. Take a look at what Miss Levitt was saying about this guy.
Peter.
Thank you, Caroline. Does President Trump want Zohran Mamdani deported?
I haven't heard him say that. I haven't heard him call for that. But certainly he does not want this individual to be elected. I was just speaking to him about it and his radical policies that will completely crush New York City, which is obviously a city that the president holds near and dear to his heart. There's
this Congressman Andy Ogles. He wants the Attorney General Bondi to explore denaturalization proceedings because he thinks Mamdani could have misrepresented or concealed material support for terrorism based on rap lyrics he wrote in 2017. Does President Trump think this is a worthwhile use of the Attorney General's time?
Well, I'll let the president speak to that. I have not seen those claims, but surely if they are true, it's something that should be investigated.
So, yeah. So remember how I said that we were going to be talking about like denaturalizing and deporting people and stuff like that? So, yeah, here we are. They are literally trying to get this guy deported because of rap lyrics? Yeah, here are the lyrics in question. Free the Holy Land 5, my guys. So, yeah, Zohran Mamdani was a B-list rapper in the late 2010s who, by the way, went by the name of Young Cardamom or Mr. Cardamom, which is awesome. I love that. It would be like if I went by the name Young Danos because I put that on everything. But okay. Anyway, are those lyrics probably stupid? Yes. Yeah. The Holy Land 5, as he calls them, are basically a group of people who led a foundation, some kind of charitable organization that was supposed to support Muslims, and they ended up funneling some money into some terror groups, and they got arrested for it and went to prison. So, should he have said free the Holy Land 5? No. And yeah, that was probably stupid. I will say that I have also written some raps in my younger days, and my ciphers were not always filled with nuance. So I get it, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I don't think the guy should be deported over that. Maybe that's radical, but I just don't think he should be deported over writing literally half of a line that is stupid. Would they have cared about this at all if he didn't win the primary? No. Nobody was even talking about his rap career and free the Holy Land 5 like a month ago. I don't think anybody knew about it at all. I actually was trying to find the song online so I could listen to it. I can't even find it. So, nobody was trying to get him deported a month ago. Nobody cared about this a month ago. That should be telling in and of itself that nobody actually cared about any of this until he won the primary. But there you have it. So yeah, none of this was even mentioned before he won, which nobody thought he could win, because of the, aforementioned establishment shilling of Andrew Cuomo. So now Andrew Cuomo, even though he conceded defeat in the primary race, is going to be running as an independent on the mayoral ticket. And by the way, also the current Mayor Eric Adams, the guy who we talked about way back in like episode 3, who cut a deal with the Trump administration to get out of corruption charges in exchange for implementing some severe immigration policy. He's also running too, even though Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo are both Democrats and should know that running on the same ticket is just going to make it more likely for a Republican to win, God forbid. They're doing it anyway. And it's because they don't actually care. They don't care. They would genuinely rather a Republican win than a Democratic Socialist, because they are so terrified of change. And the thing is, like, when you think about it, when you really think about it, Republicans right now are pooping their pants about Zohran Mamdani winning the primaries. You know who they're not pooping their pants about? Andrew Cuomo. Eric Adams. So if you are a Democrat and you don't support the Trump administration, who do you think you should vote for? Should you vote for the guy that they are freaking out about and totally scared is going to win? Or should you vote for the guy that they're actually pretty lit about and are going to be super happy if he wins? And that's, again, aside from the point that Andrew Cuomo is genuinely just a horrible, terrible person that should have never come out of his disgraceful retirement. I don't even know how the dude isn't behind bars, frankly. The dude is really terrible, a terrible person. And the thing is, I genuinely actually think Republicans should be excited about this, because Republicans theoretically should be thinking that this Democratic Socialist is going to implement his ideas and presumably is going to fall on his face and fail, right? That's the idea. That's why you're not a Democratic Socialist, because you think it's stupid and because you think it's going to cause a bunch of problems. So if you think it's stupid and you think it's going to cause a bunch of problems, let this guy do it. Let this guy walk into a trap of his own making, right? Let him try and fail big and fail embarrassingly. Because if he fails big and he fails embarrassingly, guess what? He's going to set back the Democratic Socialist movement for decades. Bernie Sanders gained them a bunch of ground and a bunch of traction. That's why you have people like AOC who are growing in popularity. But if this guy becomes mayor of New York and it falls apart on him, it will set their movement back like crazy. So if you genuinely believe that He's not going to be successful. Let it happen. Why are you so scared of it? Let it happen. And the thing is, like, Republicans at this point, MAGA people in specific at this point, they're just dumb. They're just stupid. I'm sorry. You just are. If you are supporting Trump at this point, you have no moral compass and you are dumb. I'm sorry. There's no other way of saying it. Democrats at this point have proven time and time again to be stupid, yes. But you should know better. You should know better. You should know that this political infighting is not going to serve you whatsoever. This political infighting makes you weaker at a time where you so desperately need to be strong. For the sake of this country, you need to be strong. So, am I disappointed in Republicans? Yes. Yes, always. Forevermore, because of this stupid MAGA movement that you have let infest your party and turn you into some sort of monstrous caricature of what a Republican should be. Yes, forever. But am I really, really disappointed in Democrats right now? Yeah, because we need you. Because we so desperately need you to be able to fight back against this lawlessness and this brutality and this evil, this unconscionable attack on democracy and on the Constitution. We need you. And you are letting this partisanship, this infighting, these groupthink mentality, this tribalism within your own party tear you apart. It is horrible. It's embarrassing. And it's frightening. It's really frightening for the future, because if you can't get it together, I don't know what's going to happen. If you can't get it together, the future is going to be looking real bleak. Because Republicans are already pulling out every single dirty trick in the book. They're doing it right now. And they're going to be ramping it up. So let this be your weekly call to action. Please. The 2026 midterms are coming up, and they're coming faster than you think. If you live in a red district, look up who is running. Who is running for the Democratic nomination. See if you can donate. See if you can go campaign for them. Contact whoever is running in your area and see how you can help. Because Democrats are clearly not helping themselves right now. But we cannot afford another 3.5 years of Trump being able to do literally whatever he wants. We have got to flip Congress. We have to. The stakes have never been more dire. So the very last thing I want to dive into just a little bit is I want to talk about some economic stuff. And this is going to kind of be a mishmash. It's going to be a little bit of news. It's mostly going to be talking about like theory and some of the stuff I actually talked about in the last episode when I was talking about capitalism. So first of all, just in the news segment, the dollar is down. The dollar is down bad. It's down by about 10% since the start of the year, which is the sharpest decrease in the value of the dollar since the early 70s. So I understand that in some ways the markets are looking up. In some ways things are looking a lot better. But you have to keep in mind that the value of things are going up because the dollar is weaker. It is 10% weaker since the start of the year. That's drastic. It's like if your dollar was only worth 90 cents. That's a big deal. So keep that in mind as you see these reports about the stock markets being at all-time highs and stuff like that. And another thing you have to keep in mind is that's probably not staying that way. And yes, the markets as a whole will go up. That's just the nature of how things work. The markets will, generally speaking, always go up and up and up. That's why they say invest in the stock market, yada, yada, yada. I understand that. I know. Trust me, I know. But the all-time high that we're at right now is not a legitimate all-time high. And it's going to be going down again soon because Trump has been running his mouth about Canada tariffs again. And here, look, I'm going to show you the tweet right here. So he's talking about how Canada is implementing a tax on digital items from America. And that's their right. That's fine. They can do that. Europe already did that. And he's saying we are going to be implementing stricter tariffs on Canada because of it. And he is still, by the way, somehow clinging to the whole Canada is going to be paying for the tariffs. I think and hope that anybody who's viewing my content knows by now that no, the other country does not pay the tariffs. If we put a tariff on Canada, that does not mean that we are charging Canada money. That means we are charging Americans money that buy things from Canada. So just to clear that up, I thought everybody knew that by now. I thought even this administration was admitting that now because he was talking about how Walmart better not increase prices because of tariffs, which was sort of admitting that, yes, that means that Walmart is paying higher prices. But whatever, I guess he's going back to that whole, we're going to make the other country pay for it. He tried to say that with the Mexican wall too. That never came to fruition. So whatever. I hope people understand when he's talking about implementing tariffs, he is talking about taxing you, making you pay more. And because of that, probably it's going to be affecting the market. We'll have to see. But that was just a brief thing I wanted to cover. What I really wanted to talk about more was some of what I talked about last week with capitalism. It's just like, man, it's just bothering me. It's just bothering me. I had so many people come out of the woodwork and talk about how the problem is people just don't want to work hard. The problem is people want to go out to eat too often. Oh, you look like you could cut out a few meals and save some money, buddy. I cannot tell you the number of times I got comments saying that basically you're fat, and so if you just eat less, you'll save money. As if I was even complaining on my own behalf. I actually own a house. I am one of the few lucky ones of my generation. Half of millennials do not own a house. And I know when you think millennial, you think like young people. That's not the case. Millennials are people who were born in like the 80s. So it's not like there's a bunch of young people who don't own homes anymore. It's like people in their like early 40s now who don't own homes. Half of us. And I had so many people coming out of the woodwork talking about, oh, I'm only making, this much money and I'm still able to make it work. And then when I engaged in a dialogue with them about it, every single time to a T, it came out that they bought a home 2, 3, 4 decades ago. And that, I think, is actually the problem. I have been doing a lot of thinking about this. I've been doing some research on this. And I think that is genuinely the number one issue on why it seems like there is such a huge generational gap in between people understanding that we are in an economic crisis right now. Because if you look at the data, the people who were buying homes 30 years ago are the same people who are buying homes now. Not as in it's the same age groups of people. I'm saying it is the same people. So 30 years ago, a 30-year-old would be able to buy a home. And now, 30 years later, that now 60-year-old is the same person who is buying a home. And it's because he was able to sell his home that he bought 30 years ago. See, inflation has affected everything, right? And the cost of groceries and the cost of gas and the cost of everything to some extent. But the thing that inflation has affected most of all, and in a frankly artificial way, is the cost of housing. Rent prices and mortgage costs have gone through the roof. That is not just normal inflation. They are increasing at a startling rate. So the thing is, if you bought a home 20, 30, 40 years ago, and you are not struggling that much right now, you have to consider that it's because you locked in a price 20, 30, 40 years ago that is now everybody else's biggest expense. Everybody else who gets a house nowadays, their biggest bill by far and away is going to be their mortgage payment. If you bought a house 25 years ago, your mortgage payment is probably less than your car payment now. That is unheard of to millennials. That is not the same reality that we live in. So I was talking with this guy who was bragging about how he makes, I make $26 an hour and I've got a huge retirement account and huge savings and stuff like that. I engaged with dialogue with him. I got him talking about his life a little bit, and he admitted he bought a house in 2010 or something for like $40,000. Like, okay, yes, you had the privilege of buying a house during the housing crisis when housing prices tanked for a price that I could not buy a plot of land for now. Yes, it makes sense that you are getting by just fine because you have no house payment, essentially. And rent payments are the same way. I mean, even though if you bought a house 30 years ago for a certain price, that is now a fixed price, and rent does not really need to increase much at all, other than, a little bit for inflation, the cost of maintenance and stuff. Rent prices still increase like crazy. That's why, for example, when Mamdani talks about rent freezes, I don't know, I'm kind of on board. Because I know in the past, historically, in other countries, it has not worked, but frankly, rent is a scam nowadays. It really is. It's a predatory scam. When you pay your rent every month, you are paying some rich guy's mortgage. Plus, and I have been hesitant to kind of go on these sort of rants and stuff, but genuinely, the idea of landlords, it just grates me. It really it grates me. Because as a landlord, what are you doing for society? You are basically just leeching off of it. You buy a house and your mortgage payment is $1,000 a month. Why are you charging somebody $2,500 a month for rent? Why? Because you happen to have enough money back when the house was cheaper, and so you just deserve to be making $1,500 a month for doing absolutely nothing? For having to pay some, modicum of money for maintenance and upkeep that is absolutely not $1,500 a month? I mean, how is that fair in any way? It's just not. So when these billionaires and these real estate moguls are talking about leeches of society, they're talking about poor people just leeching off of them, just using the social safety nets and food stamps or welfare queens and stuff like that. No, I cannot help but think that these guys are the real leeches because they're just sitting there doing nothing and becoming millionaires because people have to pay them money for the privilege of living in a home. And they don't just have to pay enough for the home. No, not good enough. You have to pay double or triple whatever the mortgage payment is, because otherwise that landlord won't be able to live in an even nicer and fancier house. And by the way, if you ever get out of the rent trap and you ever finally make your way to getting a house, your landlord loves it because he's going to go raise rent on the next sucker who comes in. It's just, man, it just bothers me. And I have so many people coming out of the woodworks talking about, oh, you're just mad because you're poor. You're just mad because you can't get a house. Dude, I have a very nice house. Like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about for me. I'm talking about for my kids, man. I'm talking about for your kids. I'm talking about for the future of this country. And you're pretending because you're not affected, it's not a problem. And you're letting the whole country burn down around you because you can't scrape together some modicum of empathy to care about people who are less fortunate than you. And when an entire generation is crying out about the inequality and the unfairness and the American dream being dead, you laugh at them and you tell them to work harder. You tell them it's a personal problem. What is wrong with you? These are your countrymen. These are your future. So I'm sorry. I did not mean to get this worked up about it, but it breaks my heart I am filled with such a righteous indignation that we live in a country where the American dream is dead, where people don't think they can even own a home anymore. Forget about the white picket fence and the 2.5 kids and a golden retriever. They can't even buy a home. And you sit there and you argue that minimum wage shouldn't be any higher. These kids should be making $10 an hour flipping burgers for you. You think it's okay that these people that you take advantage of every day when you go eat fast food and you go shopping at Walmart, you think they don't deserve to earn a living wage? You think they don't deserve to live, to own a home, to live the kind of life that you live? Because what? Because they work at a job that you take advantage of, that you demand, that you need in your life? If you sit there and you go through a drive-through and you are not arguing tooth and nail for a higher minimum wage, you are a hypocrite. If you sit there and you go shopping at Walmart and you make the cashier ring up your groceries and you smugly look at them and think, you should work harder. You should get a degree. You are what is wrong with this country. And I'm sorry, I am done playing nice. I cannot do it anymore. You have shown me time and time again that you have no empathy. You just don't care. You just don't care. And how are you supposed to talk with people like that? How are you supposed to convince somebody to care? How are you supposed to convince somebody to have some decency, some humanity? You can't do it. You can't. So I guess in my final call to action, I'm going to say this. Go out there and try and convince people to care. And if they show you who they are, you believe them. It's time to cut ties. It's time to move on. Do you want these people in your life? Do you want these people that if you weren't blood related to them, if you didn't work with them, if you weren't neighbors with them, wouldn't care if you were lit on fire? Do you want them in your life? It's time. It is time to draw lines, because it doesn't matter how good of a person you think you are. It doesn't matter how good of a person you think they are. If they don't have the modicum of empathy that they need to understand that we live in a broken system, they're just not worth the time of day. So go out, have conversations with people, break out the stats, break out the figures, see if you can prove with logic and facts that this system is broken. And if they refuse to listen, cut them out. It's done. You can't convince somebody to have a heart or a soul. You can't do it. So thank you sincerely. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Awakening the Ordinary. I would be so more than honored if you would leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear from you. I value the dialogue that I have with you guys more than you could possibly know. Some of the discussions I've had on YouTube and TikTok have truly changed my perspective. So thank you for that. And remember, when you change your perspective, your reality changes. I'll see you soon.